Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network News. As always, I'm your host, The Spicer, and today's special report is brought to you by none other than Canadian Gundam. Canadian Gundam is your one-stop shop for all your Plamo and Gunpla needs here in North America. And when you're at checkout placing your order with them, don't forget we have a promo code Gunpla Network that saves you 10% off. Now, of course, we'd be remiss in not doing a special report on the Perfect Raid Unleashed RX-78-2 Gundam. This seems to be a fairly big departure and a pretty big advancement, so let's kind of jump right into the details. So if you haven't heard by now, of course, this is the newest Perfect Raid, and this is kind of, in Bandai's eyes, going to be the ultimate version of the RX-78-2. Their little press release says this is the result of the accumulation of development and evolution over the 40-year history of Gunpla, leading into a new era. So these are some pretty big claims, and it does look really good. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really cool things here, but let's see if it's anything we haven't seen before. Now, one of the promotional images they did release, as they released a lot kind of really quickly, shows the way they plan this out, and there's 5 different phases. So we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and phase 5. And the way they kind of term it is that phase 1 here is going to be the internal frame. As you can see, it is the internal frame. And then you have the mechanical parts, so kind of a lot of the internal work that's probably going to result in a lot of the gimmicks we'll see later on. Then you've got the truss frame, which is going to be a lot of the metallic-y parts that'll shine through when we get to phase 5. Have phase 4, which is everything complete and on the kit. And then you'll have, or phase 4, then phase 5 is everything on it, but everything opened up. Now, in terms of what the internal frame is made of, this is very reminiscent of the real grade, or the early real grades, where it's pre-molded parts, which isn't horrible, especially if you're looking for more of a kind of statuesque type thing. And in this bigger 1/60th scale, it'll probably work a lot better than it did for a lot of the smaller 1/144 real grades. But I found it interesting that they would go back to something like this, especially after straying so far away from it in the real grade line. So this is going to be the fastest assembly of the inner frame, the speediest assembly of the internal frame through the entire body in PG history. A little strange in my opinion. I think maybe they're trying to open the Perfect Raid line up in terms of skill level, but really a Perfect Raid, well, it is more complex than like a Master Grade, isn't such a huge jump that I think that's the barrier for people. As long as the inner frame here is stable, I'm not too concerned about it, but it is somewhat odd to me in terms of this choice, but either way I think it'll turn out fine. So now that we've got phase 1 out of the way, phase 2 is going to build us up a little bit. So this is largely going to be the mechanical part. So filling out the rest of the frame for the most part, giving us kind of the more of the traditional silhouette of the RX-78-2. And as you can see here, there are a lot more pieces. You know, you have more of a full head unit, the shoulders are more built out. You have the skirting armors, you have stuff surrounding the core fighter, the arms aren't just the frame, the legs are the same thing here. And in terms of the actual phase itself, what does this do different? What is the progression here? And this is where I think a lot of the more stable articulation comes from, because they make a bigger point of it here. They do kind of, they don't really point it out in phase 1, which kind of strikes me as odd because I feel like a lot of the articulation's already there because it's the internal frame. But they cover it in this phase, which is fine. I think that maybe there's some stability reasons they kind of point it out this way, but we see there's a kind of forward moving hip gimmick, kind of looks like it moves up and out, and then the front skirt's going to move down. So that's cool. And now on to phase 3. So this is going to be what they termed the truss frame. So we're going to see a lot more of these silvery parts all over the body. Once again, more so filling out the silhouette of the RX-78-2. I think a lot of this is going to be shining through, so I can understand making it a different color. I'm not 100%, I don't know that that's going to be die cast. It could, which would be cool, but I don't think I've seen anything mentioning that. It just looks like color-wise it could be. But in terms of what we actually see from Phase 3, is it's this multi-layered structure, so they're really going in on that, hey, this is going to shine through. You may be able to see some of it just standard without moving the armor, but most of it's going to be accessible through the armor itself. It does look like it's just metallic colored, so okay, so once again, they don't specify that it's not die-cast. They say it's just metallic colored, so more likely than not it's going to be plastic, which would make sense. Something this large is going to probably not want to have a lot of metal in it because it's already so difficult or so big that you don't want so much weight in there to mess anything up. I don't know, it's cool. I can understand why they would make this its own separate thing to make a big deal out of, because it's going to be a large part of the gimmicks that we see coming up here. And here's just kind of a better look at it. You see some of kind of the metal here. All the little detail here you see is phenomenal. I mean, not just the mechanical detail, but just the colors, right? It is mostly gray and in kind of that area, but you do have your little bits of gold here and here and here. Then you've got like the silver piston in there. You've got some silver up here on the head. You've got some silver in the elbows. Then you've got more pistons down here in the wrist and some more down on the legs more likely than not, and especially those big red ones that we saw earlier. So it is really nice to see that, you know, you don't have to be just the person that's obsessed with the inner frame of something to want to display it like this, or at least partially like this, because there's enough detail under there that just pretty much anyone is going to be able to appreciate it. And now we actually get to the fully built Phase 4, which is kind of surprising it's not the ending phase, but Phase 4 is going to bring us the traditional, fully done RX-78-2 silhouette. Everything's done, everything's there. You've got all the pieces, you've got all of the stickers or other types of plastics or anything like that on there, and it looks good. And that kind of brings us into the actual visuals. And one thing I have to say, the first thing I saw, or first thing I noticed when I looked at this kit, especially just finished, not worrying about any of the gimmicks, just looking at it from a purely visual aesthetic perspective, one of the coolest things I just cannot get over. I don't know why this is such a big deal for me, but you see it here, and you see it here, and then you see it like down here and over here. Now, of course, some of these can be like warning lights or something like that, like we see here on the shoulders, but I'm kind of getting the vibe that these are cameras, which is always something with a lot of mobile suits that's bothered me, especially in animation. It's a very minor complaint, but when they're like, oh no, my main camera's gone when the head's taken out, it's like, oh, where are the other cameras? Like the Titan's Mark II Gundam has the extra cameras here on the chest, and you see it later in the new Gundam. But I like that attention to detail, that extra thought of like, okay, we can make these minor adjustments, and I just love it. I don't know that like this piece or like this piece down here are going to have any kind of light piping, because this does have some LED units in it, but it would be cool if these had some kind of light piping. And in terms of actual like posability, you do have quite a bit going on. Now, of course, promotional images, you never know if there's a stand involved in here because they shop it out. But if this was able to do one leg poses like this, that's phenomenal. Like I said, perfect grades typically aren't the kit you're gonna buy to do these really extreme elaborate poses, but having that ability it's just an extra bonus as long as the kit is stable. But I wanted to take a second to to look at one of the promotional images of the layering blown up here, now that we've kind of got to the end version of what it looks like before we mess with all the gimmicks. And you just see how much layering is done. Even the hands, you see all that silver shining through, and once again in the knuckles there, just that is crazy to me. Just putting that detail, like someone had to be like, oh hey, we can layer this in a way where the knuckles are a different color and they're metallic, is just a level of thought that a lot of the smaller grades don't get, understandably, because not a lot of people are going to notice if the knuckles are different color. But once again, it's nice to see that when Bandai says this is the culmination of all of our work for 4 years, that it literally is. Like, you've got all of these things, you've got the metal grading up here, you've got the layering in something like the hands, which is very non-consequential. Not a lot of people would care if it wasn't there, but it is cool that it is. Pistons in the arms that you're not going to see unless you use the gimmick parts. More grading down here in the knees. You've got the pistons, you've got this color separation all throughout, and it even may be like a textural difference as well. Just hands down, Bandai is killing it on stuff like this. And of course, we have to end on Phase 5. So the final gimmicked up version that we'll be seeing with this RX-78-2, with all of the different parts open and kind of seeing the culmination of all the work from Phase 1 to Phase 4. So here are some of the parts opened up, so you can see there's this part here on the forearm, you've got the part up here in the shoulder, or the bicep, I guess. You have the shoulders folding open, you have the chest vents, you've got this part here, you've got the cockpit that opens, you've got the whole skirt armor situation here in the front and in the back. Then you get the legs, which are really, I would say, gonna be the biggest portion. Sure, the head opens up and it is kind of cool to see this little side portion up here, but really the legs are what we're gonna really want to look at because they have the most going on. So you have this little hatch up here on the thigh, cool, but really the knee having these little copper pieces shining through. You've got the sides of the legs opening up here, which is really nice. You've got the front of the calf here popping open to show that silver metallic inner frame plus the red pistons behind it. Then you even go down to the ankle guards doing a very similar thing, and the foot, the toe opens. Now, as far as the LED, so you've got blue, you've got red, you've got green, and you've got yellow. Yellow, of course, is going to be the more traditional Gundam Eye setup. You see that in the green as well, so I'm kind of skeptical on how they did that. If it's like a color difference in the plastic, because there's some difference visually between the green light eyes and the actual yellow light eyes. If I'm gonna go ahead and guess, I'd say people are gonna go with the yellow. It's the more traditional look. If people are shelling out this much for a perfect grade, a new perfect grade RX-78-2, it will likely be because they want to represent something like this. They make a point of the beam saber light. It does look really good up until about halfway, then the color kind of dies out. For something this small, once again, even though it's 1/60th, you have to think the beam saber is like a big pin. You're going to have issues light piping all the way down this plastic consistently. And then we get just a closer look of those LEDs in action. You see a little Amuro Ray in there. All it up, looks pretty cool. I do say the blue is still my favorite visually speaking, but once again, I think people are just going to go for that yellow. It looks the most kind of mechanical and industrial, and the eyes match the best with the traditional Gundam thing. And it looks okay. Like, you see Amuro better here than you do in some of the other ones. Like, the green maybe is okay, the red or orangey color is okay, but once again, I think yellow is going to be the kicker for everybody. With all my thoughts out there, I just cannot express how cool this looks. The perfect grade line, of course, is the pinnacle in terms of like gimmicks and surface detailing, but this just takes it to another level. All those 53 opening hatches, the light gimmicks in the chest, the head, the verniers, the light in the beam saber, the magnets holding everything on, all of the layering, the little green metallic stickers everywhere. It is just really something to behold. It's a modern marvel, if you would be so inclined. And I'm excited. I really cannot think of anything else to say that I haven't. It's cool looking. There's a lot of speculative stuff out there still, but Bandai's done a really good job to bring it out and say, hey, this is what's happening. So in the comments down below, I want you to tell me what you're most excited about on this. The gimmicks look phenomenal, but I cannot, for whatever reason, get over just the little extra cameras. That the small detail that sells me. It's so cool. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below what you're most excited about and what you generally think about it. And of course, if you've not watched our other videos, this was featured in the Gunpla Network news. And of course, our sponsor, Canadian Gundam, is moving into a new warehouse, and we've got a behind-the-scenes video on that too. Now, of course, check us out everywhere else. You can get the news in real time over on gunplanetwork.com. We're over on Facebook and Instagram and our Teespring store as well. This has been the Spicer. This has been the Gunpla Network news. And as always, keep on building.